The BBB connects people with businesses they can trust. Live happily, better after. Always look for the sign of a better business because it's looking out for you. And find a better business anytime at bbb.org.
Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Austin Calabaza. I am the Community Outreach Liaison Bureau serving New Mexico and Southwest Colorado. And with me, I have Marquise Jackson, who is the Senior Director of Business with Mission Driven Finance. And with him is Bernina Gray, who is the business with business development, also with Mission Driven Finance in Advanced New Mexico. Um, and they have a lot of information to kind of go over and a lot that you don't want to miss. And I'll go ahead and kick it off to them.
Thanks so much, Austin, and to the BBB for this opportunity. This session today will, um, you know, kind of talk about impact financing and capital access for folks in the missing middle business category. I'll go into detail about the missing middle and what that means. And so we have a presentation for you. But before that, I kind of want to, talk a little bit about who we are, Mission Driven Finance, and then introduce myself and Bernina. And so, Mission Driven Finance is a company that got started in San Diego back in 2016. We believe in getting capital into communities that have been often overlooked or underserved in some capacity and not able to get access to capital because of historical barriers, and also in that capital to promote community and social impact. So there's a team of us started here in San Diego. Now we're all across the U.S., including in New Mexico, looking to do some great work and bring capital to those underserved communities. Talk a little bit about our local New Mexico advanced New Mexico finance team or business development team. So there's me. I'm working here from San Diego, and we also have Bernina. And I want Bernina to step up and introduce yourself. But I've been in economic development for years and years, primarily in the technical assistance capacity. So I've helped several organizations, here in California and across the nation, meaning several businesses, start, grow, get capital they need to kind of expand, hire people, serve their customers and to grow organizations. So I have a deep connection to small businesses and businesses in general, and I believe in their growth and prosperity. So I'm happy to be part of the team serving New Mexico. So Bernina, you could say a few words about yourself as well.
Hi, good morning. Thank you all. Thank you all for joining us. My name is Bernina Gray. I reside here in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I run my own company called Indigitize. So I'm very familiar with the entrepreneurial space here in the state. And I also am contracting as the business development contractor with Mission Driven. We're introducing their advanced New Mexico product. Just happy to be here. Thank you.
All right, thanks for that. And someone not joining us in this picture that you're seeing on your screen, in the middle there is Lauren Groton, who's the co-founder and chief community officer at Mission Driven Finance. So Lauren is the reason why we do this great work and a big supporter of businesses in New Mexico. So and talk about how we kind of got to this point, and before we dive into the missing middle. So Mission Driven Finance in 2023, we partnered with the New Mexico Finance Authority and Next Street to kind of assess the ecosystem in New Mexico to figure out who was doing what products were available, what needs small businesses had, what gaps that they had, what was happening in the underserved community in terms of capital access, what were some of the data points in terms of amount of dollars going out and number of dollars going out and to whom and from what organizations, really trying to get a picture of what's out there and who we're serving. And so we engage with a lot of people, a lot of organizations too, whether that be, business support organizations, or other capital providers to really uh, try to get a lay of the land for the gaps in access to capital in New Mexico, so that we could figure out how to design a product that could kind of fill those gaps, and or that we can build partnerships to build a bridge over that kind of missing middle piece of capital, or that desert where businesses grow, that I'll kind of get into a little bit later. And so we were successful, and that's how Advanced New Mexico was built out from that point. So yeah, that's basically how it all happened, and these are all the partners who we work with, and our real target is to help kind of businesses that are often overlooked or historically marginalized. So I just wanted to put that piece together to kind of tell you how we got here, and then I'll dive into this missing middle piece in the data going next. So that data basically helped us understand some key capital needs in New Mexico, and this is germane to not just mission-driven finance, but I think all of New Mexico. And I think it's great to have a conversation about kind of what's going on in terms of key capital needs throughout New Mexico. So there's a spectrum that we look across when we're looking at businesses. And that spectrum, kind of begins, if you look at the, top left of your screen, people are like basically the idea stage, and they need seed capital through the maturity stage. So anywhere from when your revenue is zero to when you have more than $5 million in revenue. And in between that, once you get past the seed stage, you're kind of early stage, making some revenues, or you're growing, right? When you're $250,000 or above, and your business is kind of buzzing in, and you're heading towards that maturity stage. So as we were looking around in the different stages of funding, we said, okay, who are players in the idea or seed stage? And as you can see, there's multiple players. Especially for like tech and sciences type of businesses in that early stage, say the early ideation phase of businesses. And if you are a business that's not kind of tech and you're a traditional Main Street type of business, right, you can hit up your family and friends for cash, right? But those are kind of your options as you get to that, in that very early stage. As you progress on and you start to make some revenue, there's some angel investors, but there's also a ton of great organizations to work with in New Mexico, whether that be Dream Spring West or the Loan Fund, just to name a few, who can kind of help with some of those early stage capital needs. And as you continue to grow towards the maturity stage, a couple of things I want to point out. So after you get revenues of more than 250, headed towards more than 5 million, you're a little bit too large for some of those early stage companies in terms of if you're a Main Street business, but you're a little bit too young for the banks, and I'll kind of get into this later. So as we were doing our analysis, we figured out like there's a gap in the missing middle for organizations that need kind of growth capital because they're a little bit too big for some of the early stage companies, and their friends and families don't have that much money, and they're too young for the banks. And the same thing on the terms of the venture capital type companies, right? You're a little bit older than needing angel capital, and you're not quite don't have the revenues to attract some of those later stage venture companies. So this kind of informed our take on what's going on in New Mexico in terms of the gaps that exist for businesses there, and there were not a lot of options, which is why we decided to come into the market and try to help, prop up this part of the market. And the way we view it is we're a bridge to sustainability, and we're not a replacement for anybody that's there. There's some long-standing organizations who've been doing very, very well, and we want to be a participant in this marketplace with the end goal of helping businesses in New Mexico kind of get to where they're growing, so they can grow and mature and stay around and create jobs and have an impact on the economy. Right. So just to get to some data points, and I'm all about data. So as in looking in New Mexico, and this is probably stuff that may already be known, or you all might have a great idea about it, but if you look back, to a couple years ago in 2022, right, you can kind of see that despite there's lower levels of entrepreneurship, there's faster business growth in New Mexico. So less entrepreneurs in New Mexico, but more growth compared to a national average. So New Mexico is starting less businesses, right, compared to other places across the country, but business starts are growing faster, right? So and a lot of that probably has to do with population. But my main point for this is there's new businesses popping up in New Mexico all of the time, and as we get more and more new businesses, this gap to accessing capital is going to continue to grow. We also looked around New Mexico and said, okay, where are all the dollars going? Where are all the loans going for businesses that need access to capital? And there's no big surprise that it's centered around Albuquerque and Santa Fe, right? But some of the other areas in the study that Next Street did in partnership with us, we kind of broke New Mexico up into these regions. But so what we're calling the southern region uh, may not to local, New Mexicans may not be called that. But you can kind of see rural areas are growing, right? And even though the population is centered around Albuquerque and Santa Fe, there's business growth coming from those rural areas. And also just thinking about New Mexico as we look at the types of businesses that are here and are growing. There's a lot of Main Street businesses, retail, food services, construction, arts. A lot of those businesses and sectors are growing. So this is kind of further telling the story of the crunch that's happening in New Mexico. So you got businesses starting and growing fast. You got businesses in rural areas growing faster, and then you have the Main Street businesses that are the majority of the business, or slightly more, right? The majority of the business, and these businesses aren't attracting that early stage angel investment or VC capital that's really looking for high growth opportunities, and a lot of them are too young for banks. So just kind of compounding that missing middle challenge. So and look at what's also happening as we look at trends in financing, right? So um, in this research study that we did, there's no surprise that if we look at where's the majority of capital coming from for small businesses in New Mexico? It's banks, right? And it's the SBA loan products that is the majority of the capital. But what's happening is, it happens all across the nation, is banks are taking less risk, right? Meaning which trickles down to businesses are unable to get the same amount of capitals that they were once able to get. And here's some of the jarring numbers that we found out, and during this whole discovery process that kind of has our mouths hanging wide open. So if you look at a period between 2007 and 2021, right? So it's like a 14-year period. In 2007, banks in New Mexico were doing about 73,000 loans, right? You take that up to 2021, this is the latest we can get data. they were doing 54% less loans, right? So just about 34,000 loans. At the same time, banks went from doing about $1.7 billion in loans to 1.2 billion. So 32% reduction in the amount of loans. So not only, are banks the main source of capital in New Mexico, they're doing less loans, right, over time, and less amounts of loans. So adding to that capital crunch where, businesses, although they're growing, although they're coming from rural areas, right, that banks are doing less for them. And it's just because the banks are they're decreasing their risk. Not, they're good institutions. They just have, different credit policies and stuff like that. And then what this did was the kind of credit market, although it tightened, it hit businesses harder, right? Than small businesses harder than anybody else, especially those that are outside of, kind of wealthy type areas. So this next chart, if you look up on the number 2, kind of shows what's also happening on that side. So if you look at banks who are doing basically less than $100,000, right? So they've had from that same period, right? From, if you're looking at that 2007 to 2021, banks are doing way less amount, right? 48% less loans if you need under $100,000, right? They're doing 20% less loans if you need between 100 and 250,000, and 16%, right, less loans if you need greater than 250,000. So, this means they're focusing, on kind of doing more, even though the next are higher loan amounts. Even though still, if you look at bank loans by business revenue, so if your business has less than $1 million in revenue, bank loans by amounts have went down by 54% from 2007 to 2021. But if your business has more than $1 million of revenue, you've only seen a 12% decrease. That means that, so all of this to say that, banks are doing less for small businesses just because of their credit policies. Now small businesses don't have a place to go when they need capital, especially if their revenues are less than $1 million. Next slide. All right. So I've been kind of driving towards this point and this definition of the missing middle. I think I kind of said it, but I want to explicitly, lay it out right now. So if you're a business and you need between $0 and $150,000, right? You can go to your community development financial institution or CDFI, maybe an angel investor, maybe an online lender. I caution you there, though. Make sure if you do go online, that you're not getting taken advantage of with a predatory loan. And there's many organizations who can kind of coach you and give you advice. We're even open to giving you advice. But if you're looking for, $0 to $150,000, there's resources for you, and you're in that phase. If your business is 5 years old and you got revenues and you have a great relationship with your banker and you need $1.5 million or more, right? You can go talk to the bank. You can go talk to maybe some VCs, all right? But what about everybody else? So this is the definition of the missing middle that I kind of been building up to. So we figured out that businesses need more than 150,000, but less than what the bank can give them, and they're kind of caught in this chasm, this gap in between funding that we're calling the missing middle. Typically, we see businesses in this category needing, revenue-based finance, and so they have customers, but their customers are slow paying them, or they've won some government grants or contracts and they're waiting on reimbursements or payments, or they have some event that's happening in their business that they just need financing to get to that event, and they'll be there. Or they're a tech enabled or tech type company that needs just some debt instead of trying to raise more equity. So that's what the missing middle we're defining as. So we're looking at that desert or that missing middle as being businesses needing money in between 100,000 and 1.5 million. And the challenges there is two of them. A, just your company and what it looks like, meaning you can't grow older than you can than the years you have of experience. So if you don't meet the bank metrics, you can't get bank financing. And the lower stage lenders or earlier stage lenders can't give you this can't their program is not set up to give you capital there. So where do you go? Right. And so you get stuck in this desert, and a lot of businesses die here. And what we're hoping to do is come in with a solution to help businesses kind of bridge this missing middle gap. So we have a vision for what we're trying to do, and it's in partnership with others. Because I want this to be, more about what we believe can happen in New Mexico. So to help a lot of people that usually get stuck in this missing middle category are businesses from often overlooked or underserved type of communities, and they can't get capital, and that could just mean so many different things. So I'm talking about women, I'm talking about people in rural areas, I'm talking about veterans, people who might have been involved in the justice system, people of color, like low income people. It could be so many different types of people who we consider often overlooked or underserved. So if we partner with everybody there in New Mexico, we hope to do this right, and the outcome will be that businesses from these communities get capital that they need to both grow and then create an impact in their community, whether that be jobs for people or some social impact or way that they're moving their local community forward. So that's what we want to accomplish by coming here and expanding into New Mexico and being part of the ecosystem. And so, Brianna, you want to jump in on this one?
We're offering financing to New Mexico-based businesses and nonprofits. We're offering critical working capital that's anywhere between 100,000 to 1.5 million. You're looking at 3 to 30 month terms, interest rates up to 11.5%. And we do offer our loans and asking for no personal credit checks or personal guarantees collateral from you. We also offer structures tailored to each business's. That's in terms of revenue-based financing, and we even offer Islamic financing as well. We're really trying to address those barriers that come up for certain business owners when it comes to attaining capital from banks especially. So that's where our financing option comes in.
Thanks, Brianna, for covering that. And like Brianna was saying, yeah, this is our contribution to solving that problem for the missing middle businesses. We do want to help deploy some capital there in New Mexico and help people kind of cross this gap. I want to make sure I leave time for any questions and some engagement. In that, if businesses do need capital, they can come talk to us, and we'll point them not just to mission driven. We're really like, if we can't serve you, we'll talk to you about other options that may exist out there. But in the missing middle, deals are best when it's kind of a bridge funding opportunity. So if an organization has a grant or a contract and they're just waiting on payment in the form of a reimbursement or just a payment, we would take a look at that. We could also help people purchase equipment, do facility upgrades, expand, so working capital for their payroll, or if they need to cover rent, or if they need to refinance, high business debt. Usually companies who are in these situations, unfortunately find themselves taking merchant cash advance loans, and they end up paying daily amounts for their businesses, and it's basically a business killer. So come, talk to Bernina and I if you do have any questions about, and you think your business is in that category, and we'll point you in the right direction, whether that is talking with us, or kind of telling you what we know is out there in New Mexico for your business to look at. Probably getting close. So I also want to say a little bit about. So we are a impact lender, and I believe this is a big component of what the missing middle financing should be. As we look at deals and we talk about impact, we really want to create impact in a couple different ways. We're looking at the ownership or leadership of an organization, and making sure that a share of ownership is from that often overlooked background. We're looking at the workforce as well, to make sure that um, the workforce of these organizations employ people from often overlooked backgrounds, and and they're creating quality jobs, and like I was saying earlier, that there's a community impact. So this is specific to mission driven, but a lot of other organizations are adopting standards and policies like these. So as we look at deals and as we look to help people, we also say, in addition to what the business is doing as a business, what communities are they impacting, and who specifically is leading that impact, and who works for those companies, and what does it look like. And we think this is a characteristic to help people get out of the missing middle.
And we just had a quick question from Daniel. They just asked, maybe you mentioned it, but in your opinion, how can businesses align their growth strategies with impact financing requirements without compromising profit?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So the way we look at impact is, right. It's kind of in three different buckets. So, and I can answer you multiple different ways. So I'll give you the MDF or mission driven answer. So, um, the easiest way to create an impact is to look at the community that your business is serving, right? Meaning, where's your business located, and also who do you hire? So, say if your business isn't in a community that's kind of historically, often overlooked or marginalized in some type of way. Um, and I think in that case, you can be a little bit more intentional about uh, what your workforce looks like. Not saying you're being, doing charity work and giving jobs to people that that don't deserve it. But thinking about fishing and ponds for employees who can help your business grow, that may be from a different background. So looking at women employees, hiring from rural areas, or um, maybe working with the local colleges to identify talent for your business that comes from kind of an often overlooked background. So I think workforce is a way to do that, because you can still go to your business strategy and still grow, but you can be a little bit more intentional about who you hire and where from. And then I think beyond that, ownership is a big piece. So as a lot of companies are starting to involve their employees in kind of the succession plan for the company. So not to say every organization has to go that way, but there are options if you want to have an employee-owned structure to create an impact as well. And so that's kind of basically how I see it. And we could actually skip this slide, Austin. This is just another breakout of impact. That was a good question. And then one other thing to kind of point to is just know that we're here as a resource for all businesses, whether you're going to be you're going to need capital from mission driven finance or not. Being Bernina Love talking to people, getting to know businesses and what capital needs they have. We would love it if folks would come talk to us about MDF, but we're a resource in the community and want to point you to kind of the right direction. And so one of the analogies we came up with is looking at navigating your small business as kind of a sports analogy, and running around a baseball field. So if you come in and you talk to us and you do need capital from us, we're going to be with you as your champions the whole time, and we're going to run the bases with you. Right, to make sure you if you know baseball, to make sure you make it all from home plate all the way back around all the three bases and back home. So we got your back. Just come run the bases with us if you need some capital. So I think that's probably the last slide before thank you. So we'll be glad to answer any additional questions.
We had another question come in. When you might have addressed it, but when you speak of impact, is mission driven trying to create ownership from underserved communities, or is it a requirement to finance?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So the way we look at impact is in those three different buckets. So it's not a hard requirement, but as we in particular look at deals, we want you to meet 2 out of 3 of those requirements, but it's not a no deal if you don't. So we can talk about that. So we want to be pretty intentional, like I was talking about earlier, about helping people from those underserved communities. But say if you're not, then okay, we still want to talk to you. Maybe your company has some type of impact otherwise, community wise or socially. But typically, when I would talk to people, I would say, here's our 3 impact criteria. What does ownership look like? What does your workforce look like? What community or social impact do you have? And are 2 or 3 of those things true? So you can not have the ownership piece, but maybe you have the workforce piece and the community impact piece. We would still take a look at that. If you didn't meet all 3 of them, I think it would be a harder deal for us to look at. But I say let's talk, and we'll tell you straight up whether we think you meet or not. We do have a longer survey process that folks go through, but we're not exclusionary. We're really trying to serve all people, no matter what they look like. We just are trying to be intentional about creating that impact.
And then we had another question. What are some hurdles that small businesses in New Mexico typically face that are unique to the culture and geography here? How does that change a business model when it comes to gaining?
I didn't hear I heard how does that change a business model when it comes to, I didn't hear the last part of that question also.
What are some hurdles that small businesses in New Mexico typically face that are unique to the culture and geography here? How does that change a business model when it comes to gaining capital?
Okay. And I'll answer, and Benita, I want you to jump in, especially on the New Mexico kind of cultural standpoint too. So I've done this for a long time, and uh, 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 no matter geography, businesses usually have a couple things in common that are barriers to access, right? And so for me, as I'm been examining New Mexico and kind of looking around and having conversations, I think the one of the big barriers is available capital sources kind of being out there, and that's an external factor, nothing that can be controlled. Um, a lot of organizations don't want to take risks to get capital into some of these small businesses because they're just at a very, very early phase, right? So I think that's an external challenge. One of the internal challenges I'm really seeing in New Mexico since we've been here is preparedness, right? So um, I've talked to several entrepreneurs who need capital, right, or several businesses who need capital, but their business isn't prepared to receive capital, and that comes down to business education. and I'm not saying a formal business education, but a lot of people don't have the things in place for their business to be able to be capital ready, like a really good financial management system or understanding of the finances of their business. They may have a great business model, may have a great customer base, but because they don't have the financial system in place, they're unable to communicate that on paper to show improve the opportunity um, um, that exists. So that's kind of what I'm seeing, and I think that's uh, you know a little bit regardless of culture. Now to dive a little bit deeper, kind of into that. Also, one of the things that I'm seeing, in New Mexico is a divide in terms of different geographic areas, and who kind of moves forward and not depending on your access to networks in those areas. And so I think connections is another thing. Being able to connect with capital providers, speak their language, and network with them and help them to understand kind of what you need and where you want to go to convince us to do a deal with you. And then I'll defer to Bernina a little bit um, to maybe discuss some of the other maybe cultural things specific to New Mexico that she's seen.
Yeah, I think you touched one of the major points. It's mainly lack of awareness of the capital that's available to businesses and entrepreneurs in this space, as well as financial education, just being ready and having your paperwork in order to attain these funds, um, as well as just being in rural communities. I'm seeing that a lot, rural communities and tribal communities, being in those spaces and not having the network and connections to access capital is a huge barrier as well. But yeah, I think it all falls back onto just lack of knowledge of these funds that are available.
Thank you for that. Any additional questions?
Uh, how can businesses that might not be fully mature in their impact practices bridge the gap that you speak of?
That's a really good question, right? And so I'll give you two different answers. Um, and knowing that there's an awareness problem, and that people don't know, my first answer is please reach out um, to impact lenders such as us, and I would personally be able to talk with businesses to kind of um, assess where they're at. Um, in terms of what impact they want to create, and what they want to do organically, and maybe advise them on things that they can do to kind of meet the mark. And so that's one. But I would also look up, and they should study up and become aware of um, impact lending and impact investing, and in general. For us, it's really about um, getting capital into places it doesn't traditionally um, um, go. So beyond having a conversation with me and maybe helping enlighten you on impact that you're doing, but may not be think you're doing, or that your company has and may not think it has. I think becoming educated on um, what impact lenders are looking for. And so there's a ton of organizations across, New Mexico and just the nation in general who are having this impact lens. There's other funds, and they all have different things that they care about. Some may care about climate, some may care about women owned. Some may care about just different things, right? So becoming educated about also who's doing what, so that you can figure out what organization you align with the most. So yeah, it's either a conversation, and I can help you or point you in the right direction, or I think just doing some research to figure out what other impact lenders are out there to determine who you might align with based on what your company is doing. And then there, trust me, there are like a dime a dozen. They're everywhere. Of course, we want you to come talk to us, but there's a lot of options out there for folks.
And the last question that we had was, do you recommend any apps or strategies to help stay organized and plan ahead?
So now that's a really good question. My background was in technical assistance. So I spent the bulk of my career in the a small business development center network, not in New Mexico, but here in California. And so I'll tell you the one thing that I see that creates a challenge for businesses and accessing capital, regardless of the type of business, it always comes down to financial management systems. So, if your business doesn't have a good financial management system, I would suggest you really, really invest in one, right? I mean, and there's plenty, out there. I have experience pointing people to, of course, QuickBooks, and also QuickBooks Online. But I would say invest in the financial management system, understanding what's going on in your business. It's great to have a bookkeeper and somebody who does that for you. But I would myself become familiar with what they're doing, the money that we're making, the things that we're spending, because that can help you as the leader of that business make better decisions. If you because you might have an expense that you once you examine it, you're like, wait a minute, we can cut this expense and still do the same level of business that we're doing, and you just built more profitability. So my push would be financial management system. Please invest in that because it's the lifeblood of how you operate your business.
I'd also like to add that there are technical assistance providers in the area. SCORE is free, and there's a list of mentors that are willing to help you with that, as well as incubators. Activate New Mexico is a great one to fall back on. But yeah, there's resources out there to help you be loan ready, ready to scale your business when you are. But we're more than happy to help with that as well.
Absolutely. Thanks for that. Yeah, use those free resources. They're paid for by your tax dollars, to Bernina's point of they're out there. So utilize them as much as you can.
Absolutely. And thank you guys so much for that wonderful presentation about the services and resources that you guys have. And, like they had mentioned, they are a resource for you, and they can always connect you to the right people if they're not the right fit. And I'll definitely include their information in the follow-up email with the recording just so you can get in contact with them as well. But thank you guys so much, Marquise and Bernina, for presenting. And thanks again. We look forward to seeing you guys next time.
The BBB connects people with businesses they can trust. Live happily, better after. Always look for the sign of a better business because it's looking out for you. And find a better business anytime at bbb.org.